The Utah Story Show is brought to you in part by Utah State, home of the Aggies. So living on campus means more sleep, more friends, and better grades because you are not commuting. While others are driving or walking on campus, you're getting those precious extra minutes of sleep. Instead of going home to your mom or your cat, you're hanging out with roommates, neighbors, and friends. So 84% of USU students live away from home, making on-campus housing a community of academic support, peer mentors, friends, and constant activities. For a virtual tour, room details, theme options, and to apply, visit usu.edu/housing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Utah Stories program. We have a very exciting show for you today. Just a little bit of news about this podcast. We've been doing it now for 7 months, and as I learned, most podcasts go about 10 to 12 episodes and they give up. I can see why a lot of them want to give up. It's really difficult, actually. You kind of think that you just sort of turn on a switch and you can become a podcast and become a podcaster. It's a lot more difficult than that. If you look at popular podcasts like Joe Rogan, he actually did it for 8 years before anybody was really watching his podcast. Now, he gets about 1 million downloads on YouTube or 4 million on iTunes and all the other platforms. But it takes a long time. You got to stick with it. But really good news, we doubled our downloads last month. We were seeing this kind of slow uptick in growth. And really thanks to you sharing with your friends and liking and subscribing, we doubled our downloads last month. And that was awesome to see. And we just surpassed 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And we're, I think, the only podcast in Utah doing local live streaming podcasting. And so it's pretty cool to see that we're the only ones doing video, and to see that we're actually doing well with the video part. So thank you so much for sharing this with your friends and making this podcast successful. I think we're going to keep it up for a while. So a little bit of news. We have decided that we will be doing our Made in Utah Winterfest for 4 or 3 weekends with the Gateway. The Gateway really wanted to sponsor it and be a part of it to a much greater degree. And so the whole idea of the Made in Utah festivals is we want to share with you the best of local Utah in beer, in spirits, in cheese, in meat, and everything that's made in Utah. We feel that we want to connect the community, the listeners of this program, the readers of Utah Stories magazine, with these amazing makers who create all these products so that we can boost and bolster the whole concept of buying more locally. We feel like that our economic development should happen at the grassroots level. It should happen from the ground up. We shouldn't be expecting corporations to come in and provide our economies for all of our towns. It's like the strongest towns always have strong local communities, and town leaders and economic development directors understand that. And so we promote that idea in Utah Stories magazine. And we also, of course, promote it with our Made in Utah festival and promote it with this podcast. So, our Made in Utah festivals are just getting bigger every time we do them. And so we also thank you for coming out to those, and mark your calendars for the first 3 weekends in December. We will be at the Gateway, and there'll be awesome live music. You will be able to get cocktails and beer, walk around. It's kind of like an out of the Utah body experience, because you can't believe you're in Utah when you can drink a cocktail and listen to a band and be outside with your kids. It's just amazing. So be sure to check that out and come out. And so with that, my guest on the program today is Matt Wells. We're super excited to have him on.
Matt
Watts. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I hate to botch the name. Matt Watts, he's one of the few who actually studied art, studied animation, and has been able to make a living independently doing it. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks.
So in a nutshell, tell me, how were you able to go out on your own and become a successful illustrator, animator? What were sort of the steps leading up to you being able to do that?
Well, I have a bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Utah. And coming out of there, I loved math, I loved art. I thought that would be a great blend doing architecture. But I found that cartoons were my passion. And so my wife encouraged me to follow that passion. And so I went to Salt Lake Community College, took a few classes. I did a lot of self-study, online courses, and I would go to like Comic-Con and different conventions where professional artists were available to look at my stuff. And so I would show them my work and ask them how I could do better. And then I'd go and work on that stuff for a year, come back and show them and get more feedback from them. And so actually I've been doing freelance on the side for about 12 years. Mm-hmm. And I was really blessed to get a job full-time with a training company. I got to draw full-time for them as an illustrator and animator for 8 years.
What training company?
It's called Above Training. They do food safety training. If you took an online food handler permit here in Utah, you probably took it from them. Mm-hmm. You got to see all the pictures I drew.
Cool.
And so that was a lot of fun. And they were instrumental in helping me develop my talents because they gave me a full-time job, even though I was still very novice at illustrating. Mm-hmm. And I just kept pushing myself, asking myself, okay, what can I do so they won't want to fire me?
Yeah.
How can I up my skills and my talents? Mm-hmm. And so I just kept at that for like 8 years. Nice. And after about 8 years, I was really feeling the pull to do more with animating. And in our food safety courses, the extent of the animation was having an avatar move their hand up or point. And I was watching these awesome shows on TV like Jake and the Neverland Pirates, Nature Cat, Wild Kratts. And I thought, man, they're using the same program I'm using. I am dying to know how they do that. And I was really fortunate to get hired by Mercury Filmworks up in Canada. And I got to work on Disney's Tangled cartoon series. And just finished working on a Netflix show that hasn't been announced yet. And so
very cool.
I'm grateful they hired me because everybody else they hired went to animation school. And I was the exception.
Wow. So all self-taught, basically.
Mostly.
That's crazy, man. That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a pretty similar background. I thought I wanted to be an artist and animator, and so I was rejected from Cal Arts, so I built up a portfolio, and then I found after like 3-4 months of having this pretty nice portfolio, which I built by going to community college, a training company that hired me, and I was the only one working there without an art degree, and so I felt like I had to prove myself.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn, as much as I possibly could to be on par with the other artists, and I learned 3D Studio Max and character animation and all that stuff too. So
yeah. Oh,
yeah, you kind of find that in today's digital arena, you can go to YouTube University and learn pretty much anything you want. Mm-hmm. And is that where you learned a lot that you needed to know when you had questions? Would you go to YouTube, or how would you get?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, the program that I used for doing animation, two-dimensional animation, is called Toon Boom Harmony. And it's been around for a long time, but it wasn't in wide use in Utah when I started using it. Mm. So in order for me to learn the software, I just read the hundreds of pages of the documentation of how the program works. Wow. So I learned the hard way. And then eventually little YouTube videos here and there came out, and I would watch those. And finally, Toon Boom kind of took it by the reins, and they said, okay, we're going to give you guys a learning portal, and you can earn different achievements as you learn how to do building characters and learn how to do animating characters. And so there's a lot more resources available for free now that had not been available when I learned it.
Yeah.
And finally, when I got my job in the studio, I was so excited to finally have a bunch of like-minded people around me to help me fill in the gaps of my learning. But I was able to share with them things that they had not known because I had read everything about the software.
Tutorials in the books.
Yeah.
I remember going through tutorials after tutorial. You would just go through it, then you wouldn't quite understand what you just did and repeat the tutorial. And
Yeah.
that was the good old days.
Yeah, well,
You had to learn.
the other key is that you have to keep it fresh. Like I've helped my wife learn a little bit about Illustrator, but then she doesn't use it for 4 months and she forgets, what it was. And so it really helps to be in the program, whatever you're learning, and repeating it a lot.
So back in the day, I learned like 3D Studio Max, and then everything went online. And then all of the super high-end graphics that we were delivering on CD-ROM had to be condensed to go over, at that time, very low bandwidth.
Yes.
And then Flash became popular. At the time, Macromedia Flash, but Adobe Flash bought it out. Adobe bought it out. And that became the standard, I thought, for digital animation, at least I would say, delivered in the consumer-based market, not probably in the high-end animation market. Did you learn and use Adobe Flash as well?
I learned a little bit, and it was interesting that there was a few exceptions where Flash was used incredibly, like the Star Wars Clone Wars micro series. That looked incredible, and that was done in Flash. And then the newer My Little Ponies cartoons were using Flash up until the movie, when they finally used Toon Boom and saw the light. It was just Toon Boom was designed in mind for the animator, where Flash was a little bit more, online advertising kind of stuff originally.
Yeah.
But just like Photoshop, we use it for what we want to use it for and push it to its limits. And
yeah, and I found my little niche for about 4 years in being a computer programmer was ActionScript.
Oh yeah,
just learning how to program an ActionScript.
Bless people like you,
because nobody else would want to do that, and not many artists like to code.
Right.
But I actually enjoyed coding too, and I really got into that now because Apple doesn't. Decided they didn't want to use the Flash player. Just a little history.
Yeah.
Apple was in a tiff with Adobe, and Apple's way of sort of fighting back against Adobe not wanting to have all of their programs accepted on the Mac platform. Their little tit-for-tat war was that Apple wasn't going to allow the Flash player to be on the what's the name of the operating system for Apple? OS 10, so whatever.
Sure.
The OS platform. And so that totally screwed all my skills. Like my skills became completely worthless in ActionScript. But I mean, ActionScript is almost the same as JavaScript. If I wanted to hold that path, I could have. But so did you have to learn some programming as well?
I started learning some ActionScript in Flash because we had the Adobe Creative Suite at work, and Toon Boom was a separate program that was expensive to keep up. So we tried, when I was at the training company, we tried using Flash for a little while, but the tools were not as animator friendly as Toon Boom's were. And like you said, it was so nice having those exports. They were the SWF exports that were vector graphics. So your videos would be like 1 megabyte for a whole minute versus a flattened bitmap video is 20, 30, 200 megs for a minute.
Yeah, it was incredible how small those SWFs were.
Yeah.
And how robust they could be.
Right. And so Toon Boom could export that way as well. And so that's how we were doing it, was with the vector stuff. It was nice and light. People with low bandwidth could watch our stuff. But then, like you said, Apple dropped the Flash stuff. And then Google Chrome dropped the Flash stuff. And so we had to figure out something different to do at that point, too.
And if it's now been 10 years since I've been out of the whole programming arena, but I think that was at the same time HTML5 was starting to take off, and they were coming up with flexible, more dynamic ways of animating within the operating system.
Right.
And I can't remember. AJAX was the acronym. But then you'd have to be a hardcore coder. I mean, you couldn't be like an artist type and be doing animation over, the internet. And so it was this weird time period, and I at the time was like, gosh, what do I do? And so I started learning HTML.
Yeah. Wow. Good for you.
I just had to figure out, a different route to get more customers, and never hard to get customers if you know your skills, if you have skills in programming and doing stuff for the internet.
Yeah.
So did you get to a point where you decided, I don't want to produce animation that's delivered over the internet, I want to produce animation that's delivered over TV? Was that a conscious decision that you made, or was it?
Not really. We decided when I was at the training company, we decided that since Flash was dying, we would try to figure out a different way to go. And so we experimented. Adobe Media Encoder is really awesome with compressing videos that are full videos and making them smaller and more digestible for our bandwidths. And so we were able to figure out a pretty decent way to make full videos and then compress them down to a manageable size over whatever bandwidth you had.
Just using a codec, the compressor.
Yeah. And so something that was nice about we were forced into using that. Flash wasn't an option for us anymore, that export. Now we could actually start to use more effects and things that wouldn't originally export with the Flash format. We could do transparency stuff. We could do glows and shadows and things that we couldn't do before. And so it's interesting how life works. You start getting different boundaries, and you experiment with how you can push those and maximize your abilities within those boundaries.
If I understand that, Adobe Encoder, was that still maintaining the vector format of the animation, or it was just like the bitmap raster form of compression?
It would just compress it, and sometimes you'd get, sometimes you'd find a way that you finally had it as 10 times smaller than the original export. And then you'd listen to it, and it would sound a little bit tinny in the audio, or it would look a little bit pixelated when it was first rendering. But, there's little handoffs, and now the internet's getting faster.
Yeah, now there's not much of an issue related to that. But just a little primer for those of you who are listening. This is something I always explain to artists and people who come on board with us at Utah Stories. The difference between vector and raster is very important to know. A vector graphic is made up of points, meaning you have like a point A to point B to point C, and then you have Bezier curves between the points, and it's extremely small to condense a logo or a font in a vector format. Raster is made up of pixels, just colored pixels. And if you look at any photograph, that's always a rasterized graphic. It's not vector. So if you're dealing with like logos, if you're dealing with typography, it should always maintain vector format and not raster bitmap format, because vector you can blow up the size of a billboard and you're not going to lose any sort of smoothness in the line between points. Was that how you would explain it?
That was very well explained. Yeah, good job.
Thanks. Yeah, because I have to explain that to people, because they'll send us like a little JPEG. They'll say, oh, here's my logo. And I'll say, you got to get that as a vector format logo so you can blow it up and use it and send it to any artist who's going to run it at any size you want it. And so it's like a pretty important basic thing to know.
Yeah, and so for people that don't know, Illustrator is the king of vector graphics. That's where you go to make a logo.
Yeah.
And that's what its strength is. If you want to do paint kind of stuff, Photoshop is probably where you want to play, or Corel Painter, or iPad, the Procreate app. Those are the really popular raster graphic painting programs.
Cool.
But with Toon Boom, it's actually all vector when you create the art within there. And the nice thing about that is if you build a character, you make a character that you can turn around and animate. You can put the camera as close as you want on it, and it still has high quality. You're not getting little jagged things around the edge of the lines. Those smooth Bezier curves that are all mathematical. It's all based on grids and XYZ information and rotation and
yeah. Yeah, so we're going to take a little break, and this episode, just so you know, is geared towards somebody who wants to learn to be a professional animator, illustrator, learn how to take your artistic career in your own hands. And so when we get back, we're going to get some additional ideas from Matt on how to self-teach and maybe perhaps like what Disney and the other big animation studios are looking for in the portfolio of the potential applicants they want to talk to. So we'll talk about that when we get back. So the Utah Stories program is brought to you in part by Curry Pizza. Curry Pizza is awesome. We've been having it at the office. They've been serving Indian food for over 10 years. They opened their first location in a small town called Bicknell. It's a tiny town in southern Utah. And they were serving curry on a pizza because they had to get curry and their whole idea of these sauces into the hands of these small town people. So he said, well, I'll make a pizza shop. And it's just an incredible place. It's owned by a guy named Binda, and he was recently featured on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and he opened a second location in West Valley, Utah. I highly suggest you check it out. It's amazing pizza. The Utah Story Show is also brought to you by Paisley's Grass-Fed Beef. At Paisley's, all animals are raised in southern Utah, free of antibiotics and added hormones. Animals live on the doorstep of Capitol Reef National Park, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. They raise their animals and run their entire business with 3 core values in mind: flavor, tradition, and sustainability. Paisley's offers ribeye steaks, beef jerky, New York strip, and chuck roast. Find Paisley's at the Liberty Park Farmers Market downtown and the market at Park Silly, and all sorts of events throughout the fall and winter, including our upcoming Made in Utah Winterfest. Shop now at paisleys.com, where they have a special going on right now for quarter and half cows. You can fill up your entire deep freeze with a half cow. It's an awesome way to buy meat. And so, Matt, tell me, what is it that a Disney production studio or Netflix production studio wants to have in the portfolio of a potential applicant in an animator? What are they looking for?
So what they're looking for is for a lot of the time, I want to distinguish 2 different routes that you could go. The first route that's more common here in Utah is to be more of a generalist, where you know how to do more different things, but you don't focus too laser focused on one particular aspect of art. So I would kind of consider myself a generalist, where I can paint backgrounds, I can do character design, I can do storyboards, animation, all of those things. But I have tons of friends that are much better than me in any of those because they focus on them. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the time when you're going to get a studio job, they are looking for somebody that can do that one particular thing and to do it great. Mm-hmm. And so I had to go up to Canada to get my job to work on the Disney and Netflix cartoons, because that is where the work was being done. And so I made that leap of faith to go up there, and I showed them my stuff, and they said, okay, it's pretty good. We can see some potential, but you have a lot of growing to do. And I said, yeah, but I really want it. I'm dying to learn more and to do this. And so they let me take their test, and it was a little 3-hour timed animation test. I took it, and I failed it. And they said, Matt, we can tell that you probably felt a little rushed. Do you want to take another stab at it? I said, oh, yes, I do. And so that night I went home and I re-simulated the test for myself at home. So I did it a second time at home. And then the next morning I showed them that, and they said, oh, this is starting to look better.
Was the test like a drawing test, or what? How was
No.
it formatted?
In Toon Boom, what you have are these puppets that you build. They're kind of like pin clasp puppets that you'd make in school, where you put a little pivot in each part of the arm and then you can move it. And in Toon Boom, you can draw like 100 different hands and just swap through whenever you need a new one. And so anyways, it was just this character that I needed to animate doing an action. And so I started taking the test essentially the third time, at the studio again. And halfway through, the computer was acting up and having a hard time. And I was losing a lot of time and feeling frustrated. And I said, could I please just start over one more time? Mm-hmm. So I took that test 3.5 times. And at the end of that last time, they said that I finally did a good job. So
that's pretty awesome.
Some perseverance
that many attempts. So you passed it to a degree where they said, okay, we can hire you?
Yeah, and the challenge it took 2 to 3 more months of waiting before they actually did hire me. And I would contact them like once a week, trying to figure out a nice way to contact them without bugging them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I did that I was happy with is I knew that they were going and recruiting from lots of different places. They were visiting different schools, people that were graduating. And so I was on their social media, and I saw all the people that they were talking to, and I decided to make a picture of them running a marathon, a recruiting marathon. So the 2 people that had interviewed me, I drew them as the people that were running the race, and then I cartooned all these people that they had met all around them, cheering them on. Nice. And I was in the background too. And so it was kind of a fun way to do something nice to send to them in the email instead of just saying, hey, can I have a job yet?
Get some attention.
And so it was fun. But
did you have to start out working for really cheap, or?
Yeah. And that was the other challenge too. Like I had worked as a senior level artist here in Utah. And then when I moved up there, I essentially was earning a third or less of what I used to earn here. Mm-hmm. But I was new in the industry as a professional animator.
Yeah.
And so I was okay taking that hit, knowing that I would be learning.
Yeah.
And at least I didn't have to take 2 years off to go and do more college. At least I was getting paid something.
Yeah, I actually, that is my biggest piece of advice I can give any aspiring artist. Mm-hmm. Is like, you got to know you're working for experience in the beginning more than pay. Mm-hmm. Pay is one thing, and it's great to have good pay, but if you're just starting out, mm-hmm. even if you have to work for free, mm-hmm. but you get the kind of experience that's going to get you a really good job, it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
It's just like, if you can work under an experienced animator who knows really all the ropes and you can learn under that person, why not work for free? You just paid $30,000 for a college degree. Yeah. If you can work for free and get better experience, why not do it? Why not do an apprenticeship?
Yeah. How much were they charging at Cal Arts when you were looking into going there?
Oh man, it was $20,000 a year. That was 1994.
It's a lot higher now.
It's probably $100,000. It's probably more than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot more than that.
And the nice thing is, going with one of those schools is that they're known, they have a program, there's building blocks. You learn all the keys to the ingredients, to the recipes that you want to cook up, Yeah. And so there's definitely validity in going to a program like that, but you don't want to get stuck in 20 years worth of debt.
No, and it's like, and as far as my training company goes, I was absolutely willing to start at $9 an hour, mm-hmm. and I was like, I'm gonna bust my butt to show you I can be as good as the other artists. Mm-hmm. But it's like, as soon as I was able to show my level of skill and convert that skill into money, because we were able to attract really great clients, mm-hmm. and do amazing work for these clients, then it was like, at that point, I was asking for raises, and I got the raises and so it's just like, I think the mindset is, you think you should graduate from the University of Utah or Utah State or UVU and be able to get like a $50,000 a year job. And I think the better idea is know that you're going to, again, be working for like 5 years, apprenticing, learning, mm-hmm. getting good at building a skill set before you can really command a good salary doing something like art.
Yes.
So that's pretty much what you learned too.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with you. You have to start at the bottom of the ladder to climb up it.
Mm-hmm.
And you will climb up if you are dedicated and determined, and if you try to get along with people. I'd say one of the greatest lessons I learned working on a team was the best thing you can do is to try to help everybody else to work efficiently. If you can be more organized with how you do what you do, save things in the proper places so people can find them more easily, helping others avoid duplicating work is key. It drives me nuts when I've done something and then a week later I see somebody else is doing the same thing again because they didn't know where to find it.
Yeah. You find there's all these little reusable bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can share your libraries with other people, that is extremely valuable, like especially in animation, we found.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so awesome today about digital animation, even in the two-dimensional realm. Back in the day, when they animated Lady and the Tramp and Lion King and 101 Dalmatians, it was all frame-by-frame animation. They drew every single picture, and there's 24 of those pictures that show up every second. So there's thousands of images that you see, and it takes a long time, and those people have to be incredible artists to make sure that Simba looks the same the whole way through the movie. And now, today, we have Flash, Toon Boom. We can draw a character, cut it up into pieces, and essentially reuse that through the whole series or show. And the more poses we give them, we can reuse those later. Mm-hmm. So by the end of the series, you can animate lightning fast because so much of the work is already done. Mm-hmm. And when you're playing with these rigs, these puppets, they always look correct. You don't have to worry about them looking wrong very much.
And you just have a gesture library that you draw from, and I believe like Simpsons and even South Park and all these Family Guy, they're all using just their gesture libraries to build the entire episode every single week, right?
I would imagine so.
Yeah, because it's like Simpsons is now the longest running television show in history.
Yeah,
and it's just amazing how they just continue to crank those out. Same with South Park, and I kind of find it interesting. Like when I was just getting started in animation, and I had decided I'm gonna stick it out at this training company and not go to CalArts. The idea was that animation had sort of degraded and declined because of computers, because they were looking at more efficiencies, and they were going away from the hand-drawn cell-by-cell animation. They were moving everything onto computers, and so you were seeing sort of a degradation of the quality. And then everybody was saying, well, we have to return back to the way, look at Pinocchio and Dumbo and Snow White, how incredible the animation was. And then right when that argument started building steam, South Park comes out.
Yeah.
And you learn, there's really no conventional wisdom in animation. You can't say that everything has to be a certain way.
Right.
Because obviously viewers determine that.
Yeah.
It's not up to the animators or to, the level of perceived quality of art that everybody thinks there should be out there.
Yeah.
Have you found that too? And
yeah, the shows that I've worked on, they've been very different styles, and sometimes some of the shows that look like they're a little rougher, that look a little bit more sloppy, you think, oh, it's a piece of cake to draw that way. Well, they consistently draw that way, and it's their style. And so actually, it can take time to draw sloppy on purpose.
Yeah, maybe South Park's harder than I would imagine.
Like King of the Hill or other shows where like the line quality, it looks kind of scribbly sometimes, and just not the Disney quality that you're used to seeing. Just the lines are perfect and flowy, and
it's easier to draw a vector flowy nice line than a vector scraggly line, that's for sure.
Yeah. But something else that I thought I would mention is what it's like for somebody to try to get a job in Canada. Should I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
So I was here and I was dying to learn this Toon Boom workflow. And I thought, well, you should probably go where the jobs are. And I saw that all of the two-dimensional shows in Toon Boom were pretty much being produced in Canada. And I finally found out why. So the studios in California, Disney and Nickelodeon, they will draw the rough storyboard stuff over there. They'll record the audio, write the music, all that stuff. Then they send it up to these Canadian studios to get it animated. So they make it look nice. The character designs are sent up to these studios. The studios up there like Mercury Filmworks, Brown Bag Entertainment.
Because labor's
Guru.
cheaper, or why?
What happens is there are tax credits that are given. So it can almost be half price to get the animation done up there because the Canadian government is paying these entertainment studios to give Canadians jobs, essentially. And so if you are looking to go get a job up in Canada, it is an uphill climb because I went there and I was not Canadian. And so that means that the company hiring me does not get 2 of their tax credits that make me cheaper to have on staff.
Oh, okay.
And so then once I lived there, I moved there and I said, okay, I'm planning to stay here. They got 1 of those credits. So I was still a little bit more expensive. They're not getting the full deal on me. And so I worked towards getting my permanent residency or citizenship, which would have given them that 2nd credit, and then I would be a good deal for them. To get permanent residency, you have to do an FBI background check and get your fingerprints done. I had to take an English test that cost about $315. I had
because they thought you didn't speak English properly.
It's just a checkbox.
Those Americans, they don't know how to speak English.
It's wild. They told me that there was a professor of English at one of the universities. She had to do the exact same thing. She had to take the English test
just mandatory
to check the box, and then you have to pay to get your credentials evaluated. So I had paid like $200 or $300 to get my University of Utah degree sent over, and they said, yeah, you've got a degree. So it's an expensive process to go up there.
How long did you live there?
I was up there for 1.5 years.
Oh, that's all.
And so I want to tell you another thing too, is I had a family. And so I go up there and I'm earning a lot less. I was not able to support my family on the income from the studio. And when you go get a job up there, you are only allowed to work for the studio your work permit says you can. So I couldn't even do side jobs to draw caricatures for people. I could only work for that studio until I got my citizenship or permanent residency. So the last thing I want to tell you about that is if I would have been single, it would have been a lot easier because the drop in pay wouldn't have meant as much to me. You could support yourself just fine if you were single and starting your career. But I've got 3 kids and my wife, so
So you moved your whole family up there?
Yeah, we moved all the way up there. We paid our own expenses to do that. We sold our house in Utah. We were blessed that our property values went up, so we had extra money to help us make that move. And then we had extra money to live off of while I wasn't earning very much up there.
And what made you decide to come back?
Well, after 1.5 years, I still wasn't earning enough to support my family.
Really?
And my wife, her training was in jobs that were restricted for her to do up there. She couldn't work in childcare or in the health field without being a permanent resident. And so
it sounds a lot like the UK and my experience trying to live in the UK. Yeah. My wife had a good job at working at Cambridge University.
Wow.
It was a research job. But then they didn't want to let me get my visa or get the ability to take a job. They're really sensitive about protecting jobs, unlike the United States. And same thing. It's just like if you're allowing one spouse to have a job and a work permit. Why not allow both of them?
Well, I've got to tell you this. It's kind of silly. So for me getting my work permit, I went up there for 3 months. I lived there. I had my interview and I was waiting for the job. I filled out all this paperwork. I finally got the job offer. I finally got the work permit. And then when my wife and kids came across the border, they said, "Oh, would your wife like a work permit too?" I said, "Oh, yeah, she would, if we don't have to do any other paperwork." So she was able to kind of piggyback off of all the work that I had done.
Oh, really?
And she was actually more employable than I was because she had an open work permit where she could work for anybody except for healthcare and childcare.
Uh-huh.
And so it was a really interesting thing.
Did she get a job?
No. She applied for a few and wasn't getting any.
What part of Canada?
So we were in Ottawa. It's up above New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about a 32-hour drive from here. I've made that drive twice.
Really?
Twice and a half.
Man.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful drive. But yeah.
We have all these Canadians we're friends with.
Mm-hmm.
Our next door neighbor, and then our best friends who live in Teesdale. They just talk about how awesome Canada is, and my favorite YouTuber is from Canada.
Uh-huh.
The guy who builds the log cabins. His name's his channel's called My Self-Reliance. I highly recommend everybody check it out.
Cool.
He builds all these log cabins, and he does it in the Canadian wilderness just with hand tools. Hardly ever uses any other kind of tool, and he's just amazing. But Canada, it's like they're doing some things right. Obviously, they're maintaining their standard of living. It's not exploding in growth like we're experiencing here in the Western United States.
Mm-hmm.
But they're more, I think they're more liberal-minded socialist, right? Did you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get that sense? They have
Yep.
nationalized healthcare and that sort of thing.
And they're proud of it.
Yeah, I lived under that nationalized healthcare for a year in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and it was awful. Like anybody who could afford to would go to see a private doctor, but if you were poor, it was, I guess, nice to have free healthcare.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a different story in Canada.
It felt about the same to me. Stuff was taken out of my check every month to take care of supplemental insurance, and I honestly didn't feel like I was covered any worse or better up there than I was down here, and stuff got taken out of my check here. So
yeah, I actually think they spend far less on healthcare overall in the UK than we do in the United States, despite their nationalized healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the level of quality care is quite a bit lower there, because if you're going to go the nationalized route. And so there is a trade-off I think people need to see when considering the national option. But.
Yeah, and like a couple more things about the experience in Canada that I'd like to point out.
Mm-hmm.
In Ottawa, I was in the nation's that's Canada's capital city.
Mm-hmm.
And chicken was $6 a pound, and that was on a good price.
Wow.
My running shoes, they're Asics. I can get them here for $50 a pair. Up there, they were $240 a pair.
Jeez.
It is common for clothing to be significantly more expensive up there. And like the price difference, it's like $1 equals $1.20 up in Canada. It fluctuates, but some of those things are ridiculously more expensive. Oh, here's a great example. The post system. My mom sent us a Christmas package. Cost her $40 with UPS to send it to us. Cost us $80 to receive it.
No way.
Yes. And
Jeez.
so we almost refused it and sent it back. But
Was the gift worth more than $80?
yeah, but that's something where if we didn't have extra money, I don't know how we could have survived. It was so expensive.
you learned a lot while you were there, but you didn't get paid a lot, and you ended up having to move back. Is that it in a nutshell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even though they offered to pay me some more, but it wasn't enough for me to support my family like I had down here, especially with the high cost of living. Rent was more expensive than it is down here in Utah. And so those are considerations. One other thing I would say, that if you're trying to get in, some things that you can do, I would highly recommend going to conventions where you can meet professionals.
Yeah.
Go to Salt Lake FanX Comic Convention. That's a great place to meet people and artists and sometimes animators.
Mm-hmm.
The two best animation conferences I can tell you about are in California. There's Lightbox Expo. That just started this year in September. And then there's CTNX, and that is in November. And I went there. I met people that animated on Beauty and the Beast and Princess and the Frog. And I met Toon Boom themselves. Like, they made the program.
Cool.
And I showed them what I had done, and they said, "Wow, you did this figuring it all out on your own?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we'd love to tell people that it's possible. You did it, so other people can do it." And so they did an article on me. And then they also were very kind to offer to refer me to businesses that used their product. And so that's how I was able to get a really great connection to go work for Mercury, because Toon Boom knew them. And so they said, "Hey, we met this guy named Matt, and we think that he could really help out at your studio."
And Mercury's the place in Canada.
Yeah,
so
that's
they gave you the
one of
open
them.
door.
There were 7 or 8 studios that did animation in Ottawa.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because even these guys I worked with at the old trading company, they were really experienced artists, really professional. One of them worked on Smurfs, and if I remember right, I think he said they moved their production to Canada in the late '80s, something like that. Maybe that's when they started subsidizing the animation market in Canada.
Yeah, and thankfully they're doing it here in the States a little bit too. Georgia gets some tax credits for some of their animation studios. I believe Florida as well as Texas, they have some of those same subsidized tax credits. And so it looks like it's catching on more. And so maybe we will start to see more of that work done here in the States instead of outsourced.
Yeah.
But for right now, if you really want to work in the Toon Boom industry, you probably want to go up to Canada.
Why would you not recommend Hollywood? Don't a lot of the Pixar, animators, or is that just another realm?
So Hollywood's great. Primarily, you'd probably find jobs in 3D or in storyboarding or character design.
Yeah.
So if those are the jobs you're going for, go to California. There's tons of work in that vein. But as far as I could find with studios that were using Toon Boom, there wasn't a whole lot in California.
So if you want to do 2D, that Toon Boom is the main platform, and you should probably look to Canada.
Yeah.
And not Hollywood. But if you're good with 3D, and I know like BYU has a really excellent animation program. A lot of their artists end up going to work for Pixar. And that was just starting to burgeon when I graduated from high school. And
yes.
I debated whether I could go to BYU or if I wanted to try to go to Cal Arts or something. And but BYU is really amazing. Some of the work I saw that's coming out of there is just really top notch. And do you know why or what they've done there to really tool up their education so that they're doing such high end animation?
Well, they've got some great connections. And like I said, that's why you want to go to CTN and FanX, is you need to meet some people face to face and network with people. When you can make some connections and they've seen you, they know who you are and what you feel like to be around, you have much better chances of getting work. But the other thing I'd say is something that has helped me be successful is being prayerful about it. Like, I believe in God and I pray and ask, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And that was the answer for me, was move up to Canada. And so I did it, and I was like walking on water, worried about how this was going to work out, waited for 3 months without really a solid response. But I felt like I should stay there, and it did work out. And that is really why we came back too, is the circumstances weren't the best, but we also felt like it was time to come back to Utah. And so I'm still exploring and trying to find what it is I'm going to do here. I've set up my own freelance business, and some stuff is trickling in.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, BYU, they're very faith-based, and so they're trying to be inspired on their next choices.
Yeah.
So I would say that helps.
So how do you find work, like being a freelance animator?
Yeah, so thankfully I've got my Instagram, Matt Watts Art, and my Facebook. One piece of advice that I received about social media was to try to focus on one platform at a time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're spread too thin and you're doing it on 6 different platforms, you can't focus.
Yeah.
So Instagram has been my favorite one to focus on, but honestly, the Facebook people that know me is where I've gotten jobs from. People that have heard about me is where I've gotten jobs from. So not even necessarily the advertising I'm trying to do. It's people that know me that have met me in other places or have friends of mine. And so I feel like almost all the work I've received so far has just been a blessing. I have not been able to calculate it and grab it myself. But
what do you mean by that?
Like, I would do an ad on Instagram.
Oh,
Nobody would respond to it.
Yeah.
I would put up, these are my rates. Nobody would respond to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few months down the road, somebody would say, hey, Matt, can you do a commercial for me? And I'm like, oh, did you see me on Instagram? No. Did you see me on Facebook? No. I'm just your neighbor, and I know that you like to do art. And so, so stuff like that. And then the other thing that I am trying to do that I think will be helpful is the more that you can sound like an authority on what you do, the better. Mm-hmm. So, I got to do a panel at FanX Comic Convention.
Oh, cool.
And so I got to meet a ton of people. I had a table over there, and I wasn't selling anything. I was just trying to share art tips and inspire people and help them develop their talents. And so, the more people that you know and the more goodwill you're trying to put out towards people, it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
And so I'm still hoping that comes back soon.
as popular as social media is and what an incredible tool it is, I still find that these group meetups and where I got the most help when I was learning 3D Studio was the 3D Studio user group meeting.
Yeah.
And there was one Wednesday of every month, and all these people from Provo would come to Salt Lake. We'd all meet up together. We'd show what we're doing, what we're working on, ask questions. And it was just awesome.
Yes.
And there was this company called Viewpoint Data Labs. I don't know if they still exist, but they'd show really detailed, amazing ways in which they were modeling characters that I had no clue you could do. And they would give a full tutorial on how to do it. And it wasn't like you could find that online anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think, as much as people don't use face-to-face contact, I think you still get way more out of it.
I totally agree with you. And I have found great resources in Utah County. I've found sketch groups that get together at a mall, every week, or there's different groups here in Salt Lake that get together for motion graphics and animation, and sometimes you can find life drawing sessions to attend where you can meet people.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that.
Yeah, so we'll take one more break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about sort of how to learn and enhance your underlying foundational drawing skills. I feel like that's something that's not taught enough at the universities and colleges. How do you become a better renderer, sketch artist, baseline foundational drawing? So we'll get to that when we get back. And in the meantime, I want to tell you about Utah State, home of the Aggies. Living on campus means more sleep, more friends, and better grades. While others are driving or walking on campus, you're getting those precious extra minutes of sleep. Instead of going home to mom or your cat, you're hanging out with roommates, neighbors, and friends. On-campus housing is a community of academic support, peers, mentors, friends, and constant activities. For a virtual tour, room details, theme options, and to apply, visit usu.edu/housing. The Utah Story Show is also brought to you by Legends. Legends Pub and Grill is locally owned and serves fresh, wholesome, delicious ingredients. They have everything from awesome appetizers to main dishes like steaks, burgers, and sandwiches, salads, pizzas, and calzones. They now offer gluten-free and vegetarian options. Legends features over 20 beers on tap, including more than 30 local craft beers. They have talented bartenders that make all sorts of tasty creations. Kick back and watch your favorite games on their big screens while you enjoy the awesome meal and their full bar. Reserve your space to watch big games. They get crowded. They're an awesome sports bar. They now have 2 locations to serve you, downtown at 677 South, 200 West, and Southtown at 10631 South Holiday Park Drive. Check out Legends. So we're going to bring back also for you guys a feature we had in earlier episodes of the podcast. It's called the Mountain Trails Report. I love doing this, but when we started the podcast, we realized we were biting off more than we could chew. We couldn't consistently put out the Mountain Trails Report, but we have one for you today. So this segment is all about visiting places high up in the Utah, Uinta Cache National Forest, among other places, and sharing with you these amazing hikes we go on. These photos I'm going to share with you. Tyler, can we show those? These were taken actually this morning. That's Joey, my dog. We're looking at an aspen grove, and that's high up in Mill Creek Canyon. And if you look at the next one, do we have... Yeah, you can see the aspens are just starting to turn right now. It's fall splendor in 100% spectacular color. It's awesome. So that's with me with Joey and Scamps this morning. And I'm not telling you the particulars of how to get to this hike. I decided that if you become a member of Utah Stories and Made in Utah, I will share with you how you can go to these particular spots. Mill Creek has gotten extremely crowded, and there are only a few trails that aren't now super busy and super populated, and I like to just kind of keep those on the down low. But if you become a member of Utah Stories and Made in Utah for $10 a month and support this program, support local journalism, support telling the success stories of awesome entrepreneurs like Matt and all the other people we've had on the program, you can do that for $10 a month or $100 a year. And I will tell you where I was in that photo specifically, but you have to be a member to find out. So that's a nice incentive. Just click on the members tab at utahstories.com and continue to share the podcast with your friends. It's been great to see that the podcast has grown and we're doing well. All right. So yeah, when I tried to get into CalArts, the main thing they told me was that I was lacking in foundation drawing skills. Mm-hmm. And that was something I was kind of blown away by because I sketched all the time in high school and I thought I had this awesome portfolio. But then when they showed me what they meant by that, they said, number one, you got to take figure drawing, you got to take life drawing, you got to understand anatomy of the human body mm-hmm. and how the body moves. Did you find that something similar to that when you began studying and learning it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I took the advanced art classes in high school, and I always avoided taking figure drawing because I was worried morally if it was inappropriate to take it, you know?
I heard that argument too.
And so that was actually one of the big reasons I didn't pursue art more, is I couldn't go past those foundations in my mind, you know, was what I thought. And so after I graduated from architecture, I wanted to get a job at a video game studio doing some type of art or character design. All of them required you to have taken figure drawing. And so I talked about it with my wife, and we both felt like, go ahead, take a figure drawing class. So I went to Salt Lake Community College, and it was fantastic. It was tastefully handled. You draw the nude. It's not pornographic. It is educational, and you have to learn how to do it in order to get better at your craft. Once you can draw the human figure, you can draw anything. And the the other thing too is you'll probably never master drawing the human figure for your whole life. You have to work at it like almost every day.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of websites that you can check out that are helpful. One of them is called posemaniacs.com, and you have to enable the Flash player in order to use it, but it's got if you remember the Body Worlds exhibit that came through, it looks like muscles on bones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're all these 3D models with muscles on bones with all these different poses.
No kidding.
And you
Cool.
can tell it to switch every 30 seconds for you. And so you're just sketch for 30 seconds, and it's a nice way to learn where those muscles are.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other gesture drawing tools. If you go ahead and just Google gesture drawing tools, you'll find some. One of them is called Quick Poses. You can choose if you want the people to have clothes or not clothes. You can choose what gender you want them to be, how long you want to see it for 30 seconds or 5 minutes. So I would always recommend that you almost have to start warming up every single day with some figure drawing as an artist.
And I learned from taking that class that there is really something to drawing from live models. Like it's just you develop this connection and you develop this sort of way of interpreting the human form in a different way than if you're looking at it on a screen or on a piece of paper. It's like translating that 3D full resolution image that you're seeing in front of you into something on paper. Something sort of magical happens, I think. And I'd never experienced that. I never took any sort of we drew in art classes when I was growing up, we drew like still lifes.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but when you see the model and you see the way the light is hitting their face and all of the muscles in their face, and then you see the way the light bounces off of like the nose and just like these really subtle bits of light and shade, you realize you're taking that complexity, you're reducing it down, and you're creating a more than a line and a shape. You're creating this likeness, and you're creating this the way I did a little documentary on a guy who sculpts from life in clay, and he said you're trying to capture the breath of life. That's in the Bible, like, and if you can capture that, then you've really done something special. Did you kind of find that too when you took figure drawing, life drawing?
Honestly, I had a stubborn streak in me where everybody kept telling me it's better to draw from life. and I do appreciate drawing from life, but it's not super available all the time. Like to go and find a session.
It's kind of hard to find.
Or and the other thing that's hard about it too is if you're trying to draw somebody running, or you're trying to draw a horse that's running or bucking somebody off their back, you have to learn how to like stain it into your brain.
Yeah.
It only happens for that split second. It doesn't stay paused for you. And so for that reason, I really enjoy getting to use the computer where I can pause it in an action spot, and I can, get that. For me, when I listen to a book or I read a book, I do not see pictures in my head. My wife does. I don't know what it's like for you, but I think I'd be a better artist if I did have a picture in my head, because I explore on the paper to find it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would tell you about figure drawing, and something that I like that you said, was that you interpret it. And that is something that I think we miss a lot. Are we going to be an artist or a copy machine?
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a copy machine, just use Photoshop. Turn it black and white.
Find a filter.
And other than that, leave parts out that you don't need to. Like if the arm is like halfway covered, move it out a little so you can make it more clear. Like adjust it so it's telling the story that you want to tell. That is your right and your responsibility as an artist, is to make it communicate better than it may have originally. You need to do the practices to do the exercises of learning where all those muscles are. But you also need to use that freedom of interpretation.
And that's the other thing I would say too, is that when you and I were sketching in high school, I bet we were just sketching fun stuff, whatever we wanted,
Yeah.
skulls and dragons and just whatever appealed to us.
Ligers.
Yes, the ligers. and that's what I did. And I thought the epitome of a great artist is somebody that makes it all up. And that was one of the first things that got dashed when I went to really learning. You have to use a ton of reference. If you want to draw a liger, go get a ton of pictures of lions, lots of pictures of tigers, and draw your own. Do not copy from a picture that you find on the internet, but you learn from what you can find.
Yeah.
It's amazing that we have Google available. You don't have to go to the library or the zoo. You can get all this reference really fast. And
I found it super interesting that when Disney decided they were going to tackle Bambi, and they didn't want Bambi to look like equivalent in deer form as Mickey Mouse is to a mouse in real life. They wanted Bambi to take on the likeness of actual, or the deers in Bambi, the deer in Bambi to take on the likeness of deer. They brought in deer to the studio they could sit and draw from life. And they had them walk around. They studied their back legs. They studied their anatomy. They did all this extensive research. And of course they used the rotoscoping too, so they can pause and play the motion of a deer walking frame by frame. But they realized that when you're talking about cartoon animation, you are creating a likeness. You're creating a representation of that form, of that thing that you are drawing. So it's not like you want to capture exactly the same thing. And so I really think that what the tradition of Disney animation is and what they started is really remarkable. And as computers have entered into the picture, I think that they sort of stumbled about how they were going to use them properly and how they were going to incorporate them into the art, into the animation. And it was only by acquiring Pixar that they were able to do this nice, transition and actually do blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster again, because they were in a weird funk for a while when they were trying to figure out how to best use computers.
Yeah. Well, something that you said that speaks to what you're saying now was that when you took the figure drawing sessions, you wanted to capture that breath of life that was there. Sometimes if you just start copying, it'll look really static and dead. And so I want to show you really fast with a gesture drawing what you might even start with. You start with an energy line, a few energy lines, and that could be the start of your gesture drawing, like that fast, just to try to get the energy of what's going on here. And with when we first got 3D, you can see some of the older 3D stuff that looks really mechanical and not so great. And then when they did Tangled, the movie, they had Glenn Keane, this incredible Disney animator, and he would actually go over some of these things that had been modeled in 3D, and he would draw, you need to push it further here. He was using the pencil and showing them how to get that breath of life into there that's more than just copying and
so he's drawing on top of the animated shape.
To push it.
Very cool. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting challenge, and it's like when I did 3D animation, character animation, it was like we had 5 poses, and it was like a roll of masking tape with arms and legs.
Yeah.
And to see how far it's come and how amazing these programs are. So do you now, is your primary toolbox or your primary niche in animation, would you say? Like if people are looking for hiring you for a project, would that be your best skill set?
Yeah, and that speaks again to what when you're developing your talents, let's talk about that just a little bit more. I'd say do what you want to do. If you're dying to learn how to paint backgrounds, then go do that and find some online courses. There's a great one from Chris Oatley. That's how I learned how to do digital Photoshop painting. If you're dying to learn how to do illustration or vector graphics or logos, do those things, because if you can spend your time doing what you love to do every day, your smile's going to grow on your face.
Yeah.
And so for me right now, that thing that makes me happiest is animating. I love it so much. It breathes life into me. And so I have skills to do character design, caricatures, illustrations, but animating is where it really makes my heart sing.
Nice.
And so, I'm trying to look to see if there's people that need animated advertisements, or studios that need trainings for different things. And so there's a lot of avenues where animation is used today, even little intros for podcasts and YouTube videos. And so,
Yeah. Well, I think that as far as these cover designs around you, we've tried putting pictures of people on our covers, and it just never shines like an illustration. It's like we come up with Chris Bodley, who's done a lot of our work, comes up with this guy, holding buried treasure, and he's got this like worried look on his face. Can you see? I guess you can't see that quite. But,
yeah, bring out the other cam.
Yeah, so he just like came up with this drawing. That was one of our best performing covers ever. Like buried treasure, where to find it, how to get it. And I think the same goes for animation. Like all these people think about corporate videos and think about, oh, we got to get videographer. If you take those concepts, hire somebody to help storyboard them out, and refine them into animations, they just have more power. They more connection with the audience.
Yeah, because what you're looking for is you're looking to design something to help somebody feel a certain way. And when you're taking photos, sometimes, you're restricted to people's arms are only so long. You can't make it, get a little bit more angled, a foot out there. And so in illustration, we can specifically design what we want to communicate, and we can touch it up and get feedback and improve it. Then again, when you hire a really talented videographer or photographer, that a lot of the times they can figure that out, but they need to map out the locations that they're going to shoot at, and they got to get the lighting exactly right.
Yeah,
and there's so many factors.
It's just too hard to simplify concepts in a really engaging way in videography like you can in animation. And I think that's why you and I both worked at training companies. They know that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other things you want to go over, or any other questions?
Another thing I wanted to say is just looking at this poster. Can you help me?
Yep.
So, can you see that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, notice how there could be a lot more detail on this if we wanted there to be. We could do a lot more detailed shading and all sorts of stuff. But we chose to go a little bit simpler. And does it communicate what the story is? Yeah, it does. And so that's something that's awesome about art, is you can choose a level of simplicity. You tell people where you want them to look. You tell them what you want to think and get from this. And so art is a wonderful thing that you can design and adjust to be what you want. But the last thing I would just say is to follow that passion. If you are dying to do a certain thing, you're probably not going to feel satisfied or feel like yourself until you've done it, And then once you have learned how to do that technique, you can decide if you're going to keep doing that or try something else.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I agree 100%. I think if you really love drawing, focus on drawing. Don't feel like you got to learn all the computer programs. If you really love backgrounds and nature drawing and that sort of thing, focus on that. I think if there's anything that I learned in all my years of attempting to work to become an artist, was that you're much better off being specialized than to be a generalist of everything. Like, it's fine to be a generalist, especially in Utah's job market. You'll have more opportunity in general. But if you really love the 3D objects and you like the idea of building forms. Learn how to be a sculptor, and then translate those sculptures into 3D wireframe models that then can be animated.
Yeah, and another thing with that, with the 3D stuff, yes, when you get on a computer, it's a little more technically minded, and that might scare you.
Yeah.
Don't be scared. You can do it. If you find somebody, if you have a friend that can show you how to do it, that's the best way. Like you said, if you can find a mentor to help you, that's the best. But now on YouTube, there's so many tutorials available to you where you can learn pretty much anything you want. And if you just get into it, the fear will start to go away as you practice at it. And I'll just say, art today, when you're doing digital stuff, there's a technical side to a lot of it. And I would tell you not to be scared of it. It's fine. You'll learn how to appreciate that part.
Yeah, I agree. So Tyler, who's our podcast producer today, he studied animation at the U. Do you have any questions for Matt before we start?
I'd like to add a comment to what you were just talking about, like being afraid of the digital side of artwork. It's like, as you learn it, the program is meant to make it easier.
Mm-hmm.
And as you learn it, it's going to be easier.
Yep.
Easier than traditional. And things like going back to Toon Boom, you can animate so much faster on it. Princess and the Frog was made on Toon Boom.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell in that movie, they've mastered that program, and the animation looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had so much time left over to add in so many cool effects and things like that. I think that's one of that movie's like strongest points is the effects that they added in, and they just had all that time left over because they were using Toon Boom, and they were able to produce it so much faster and have more time to do all those effects work.
Film?
Yeah.
Princess and the Frog.
I'm so glad you brought up Princess and the Frog, because that was one of the times that I know Disney started using Toon Boom. And the thing that's amazing is that they could pick the color for the frog, and then later on when they decided what the lighting was going to look like in the shot, they could go and just adjust the palette color, and it updated in all of the art. Back in the day, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, 101 Dalmatians, you couldn't do an adjustment like that. It would take, you'd have to repaint every single frame to adjust all the colors. Like, technology can help us so much.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard of a program called OpenTunes?
I have not.
It is a free software, open source, and it's, unlike Flash, it's built for animation. And they take a lot of stuff, like what you just mentioned, the color palette changing, from Toon Boom and added that into it. So if you want to get kind of into digitally animating, Flash is a good way to start, but it's pretty expensive. Toon Boom is extremely expensive. OpenTunes is a good place to start with a free software. It's really well made, and they have a lot of that stuff implemented into it.
Cool.
I love that you brought that up, because one of the things that you're going to face if you're going this route is you're going to have to face how do you get your software and what equipment do you need for the software.
Yeah, that's a really good set of questions. So yeah, where do you start?
So I'll tell you the best tablets that you can buy to draw on the computer are Wacom, W-A-C-O-M.
This has always been the best.
I started with one of the tablets that was, you just keep it on the table and it shows up on the screen. You're not, and it's fine to start there. And I used one for 8 years and I loved it and I got used to it. And then when I finally went to an on-screen drawing tablet, a Cintiq, I didn't like it because my hand was in my way. I couldn't ink and see where I was going.
As you were drawing.
And also sometimes the older Cintiqs were really warm, and so you'd get sweaty on the screen drawing on it. But the technology's come a long way. Wacom is the most expensive brand that you're going to face. There are other brands that are coming out now, like Pen something or other. I can't remember what it's called.
Huion is a good one.
Okay.
I recently just made that exact change that you're talking about. I had a non-screen drawing tablet. Recently just got a Huion screen tablet.
Yeah.
And making that change is pretty weird. But Huion is a good way to start because they're coming around and they're a lot cheaper than Wacom, and their quality is just under, I would say.
It's still really good. Yeah.
So what about using the stylus with an iPad? Is that something you ever try, or would you recommend that?
Yeah, so I have an iPad Pro and I use the Procreate app. It's only $10. It's definitely worth paying $10. And the only thing that is painful for me when using the iPad is that I'm used to using Photoshop for all my digital painting and illustration. My hand knows all the shortcuts of where to go. Drives me crazy to use my iPad because I have to click everything that I want to do.
Yeah, something that bothers me about Procreate is it almost feels like Photoshop light. You know, because Photoshop has all these things that you can do to it, just like all this warping stuff. I don't know. Procreate, I feel like just has like less features. It's a lot more simplified.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Clip Studio?
Yeah.
That one I feel like is a little bit more like Photoshop.
I'm glad that you brought it up. So people, if you're wanting to get a program to do art on the computer, Photoshop is the industry standard, and usually you can get it for $10 a month, which isn't too bad on a subscription model. Or you can buy Clip Studio Paint, and that costs like $130 or $240 for the full version. I don't remember, but it can do almost all the same stuff that Photoshop can, and it has some things that are even better than what Photoshop can do. For example, the vector tools. You can have vector layers, and you can draw these beautiful smooth lines, and then you can clip them off where they've overshot, and you get these nice crisp angles. So whenever I ink stuff, I use Clip Studio Paint, but whenever I do my color and painting and adjustments like that, I use Photoshop.
So you use both for your digital illustration?
Yeah, and I know some people that use Clip Studio Paint for everything. For me, the interface looks a little bit more clunky than the nice streamlined Photoshop interface. But you can still have almost all the same shortcut keys if you want to set it up how Photoshop is. But if you're just starting out, go ahead and get Clip Studio Paint or get one of Procreate. That's a great way. I know lots of people that are super happy to have an iPad and Procreate, and they have no other desires to learn Photoshop.
Are there any sort of like job boards, or I've heard about these like Fiverr, these kind of gig websites where you can sell out your skill set and get work based on what you show in your portfolio? Are there any sites like that you would recommend too?
Yeah, I have a buddy that was telling me about a site called Upwork, and that's where you can tell what you can do and your rates, and then people can approach you.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that.
And I have not used it, but it sounded pretty awesome. Toon Boom has a job board. You just go on to toonboom.com, and then you go to community, I think, and then people that are looking for animators will reach out on there. And then there's a really fantastic job board up in Canada if you want to find an animation job. And if you're an animator and you live in Canada, you can almost always find a job. There's always a studio that is looking for animators. So it is challenging sometimes, aside from those, to find the jobs. You'll look through Indeed and LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter, and it's you don't see a lot of those jobs.
Yeah, when you're that specialized, it's kind of good to know where to go to find work like that.
Yeah, the best place to find work is to ask your friends.
Yeah.
Like seriously, networking is the best way to go. The last place that somebody wants to hire from is the want ads. Like they would rather ask their employees to step into that, or ask their employees if they know somebody that could step into that spot.
Cool. Yeah, well, thanks so much, Matt, for being on the show today. Yeah, I think this is useful advice for everybody. And so if somebody wants to get a little more information about you, what's the best place to go? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so find me at Matt Watts Art, MattWattsArt. That's my handle on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and it's Matt. Yeah. So
we can put a link to that in the description for the YouTube video. So.
Great. Send me a direct message, and if you want me to start making tutorial videos, tell me, because I would love to do that, but I have not had enough people telling me they want it.
I
so.
totally
I
watch
want
one of them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I've been out of the loop for so long. I'd love to watch a tutorial. All right, so just wanted to wrap up by letting you know that this program, it's finally really gotten off the ground, all thanks to you, and I would really love it if you would share this program if you like it. Subscribe to our channel. It's just been awesome to share with our potential advertisers that we have over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we doubled our downloads. If we can keep that kind of growth, we can keep the content coming. We actually would really like to expand the podcast to 2 days a week. And we finally are not in the red anymore. We're not losing money on this. We're actually more than broken even, which is awesome. We can pay Tyler. And so if you believe that the Utah Stories podcast is useful and it's going to be more episodes about maintaining our quality of life in Utah, serving the entrepreneurial landscape and bringing to you some of the best entrepreneurs and people who are able to create their own wealth, that's the term I use, people who are able to acquire skills and create products that they can put in the marketplace, they can actively earn an income from. Those are the kind of stories we want to produce here at this podcast, and you can do that by supporting us, by supporting our advertisers. Again, our advertisers are Curry Pizza, Utah State University, Legends Bar and Grill, and Paisley's Grass-Fed Beef. Go visit those guys and tell them you heard about them at the Utah Stories podcast. So until next time, my name is Richard Markosian. Our production assistant is Tyler Bond and Connie Lewis. Thanks for watching the Utah Stories program. The Utah Stories show is brought to you in part by Legends Pub and Grill. It's locally owned and operated and serving up all your classic favorites and unique originals too. They have amazing burgers, which I absolutely love. Their food is made with real, wholesome, delicious ingredients, awesome appetizers, main dishes like steaks, sandwiches, salads, pizzas, calzones, and now they've got a very special new options for gluten-free and vegetarian folks. Finish off your meal with mouth-watering desserts, plus they have a full bar which offers all sorts of local craft beers. I love their talented bartenders, their tasty creations, and check them out for an upcoming Utah Jazz game or U of U game. It gets rowdy in there, but it's an awesome environment to go check out a game. They recommend you call ahead and reserve space for your group, and they accommodate all ages. They now have 2 locations. Your downtown Salt Lake City location is at 677 South, 200 West, and their new Southtown location is at 10631 South, Holiday Park Drive in Sandy, Utah.